Why is this facing no coverage among the mass media in Western society? It's disgusting. It's your boy Dame. Subscribe to me, Dame's World. We're here to talk about a very pertinent issue, what's going on in Libya. Not only is it a slave trade occurring, I repeat, a slave trade occurring, but you have food deprivation, water deprivation, starvation, famine. You have lack of shelter. You have the hoarding of African human beings in shelters living in poor conditions. And if you watch my channel, I've always been the one to say, don't let external factors dictate your well-being, but there's a limit, there's a margin to that. You have to be able to have food. Conditionally, I don't think anybody can survive without food, without water, without a substantial way of living. And the human mind is so conditioned to think about the future, it's always going to be problematic for the mind under these horrid circumstances. I've been firm believer in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it can be minimalized. It doesn't have to be everything upon those needs, but at least food, water, shelter, and security for your family are necessities that every human has the right to. At birth, it's a birthright. But you have the Western media not covering what's going on in Libya. You have African refugees, right? The African land was fucked up. There's not a lot of food there. They didn't want to be there. It's being dictated by some sort of imperialist, just like America is, just like Libya is now, controlled by the economy of someone in the UN who doesn't give a fuck about them. And then you have, on a micro sense, the militia that has been formed from the Gaddafi murder, from the Western ideals to eradicate Gaddafi, which happened. We talk so much shit about Gaddafi being a terrorist, this and that, but we're not from Libya to know whether or not he made a significant impact. From my Western perspective and what I read up on him, he wanted to form more solidarity for the Libyan people and underdeveloped nations by trying to develop his own economic dollar away from this corrupt Western structure. So for me, Gaddafi was somewhat of a revolutionary for his people. But you have Hillary, you have Obama with plans to eradicate him, and they did. He was murdered. So it's under this new militia that allows slavery, look at all these people. All these people will be in one shelter. As far as my anecdotes, what I've seen from videos. Now, mind you, Western media doesn't cover shit, so I get a scarce amount of information. But just from what I've seen, they're being hoarded in little shelters with lack of resources to the ultimate extreme. It's sick. It's disgusting. But I have to repeat, it is the Western way to suppress somebody. Famine is not absolved from our history. Famine has happened. Famine is happening right now in Libya, in Africa, in a lot of quote unquote underdeveloped nations. And I repeat, the only reason why they make the quote undeveloped nation is because the Western world took the resources from these nations. At some point in time, these nations were developed. They were thriving without being pigeonholed by the United Nations and the Western structure that only reinforces European dominance and American, which is European dominance. So you get to wondering why it's no media coverage. It's because Americans have a fucking thing to do with this. We have played our part in the oppression of colored people all among the nations, amongst all nations. If you have people trying to kill their leader, we're putting our hands in someone else's business for what reason? I don't know. Another way to treat colored people as subhuman, a notion America has had forever and Europe has had forever. So it kind of makes sense logically that America and Europe would be suppressing Libya and African migrants right now. It's just a sad thing to see, man. I want to know your thoughts and your take on it. I want to know why you think the media is not covering this. It's slavery going on right now. Literal slavery. I always talk about the the obscure version of slavery with like the Kevin Durant. Durant just said he's he got to the NBA, so he's away from systematic oppression. No, he's away from this type of oppression, which is on a different plane. I believe this one, from my perspective, is worse and much more horrid. When you can't get food or you can't get water, I think that's the lowest level of humanity that one can live up under. It's hard to survive under those conditions, no matter who you are, no matter what type of human you are. But Kevin Durant, you're not exempt from it. You look at it from a micro scale. You work and you have a boss that makes money off of your labor. That is what capitalism has been doing, and it has done regardless of what scale it is, whether it's capitalism off making slaves in Libya or capitalism off making slaves in sports. Yes, Kevin Durant can eat, he can do what he wants, but it's still an owner and a slave game. It's just something we have to point out as people who live in Western society. I'm an African and American. I face a disposition as an African and American. I go through discrimination. I am more subjugated to being in an impoverished situation, to having less food, scarce water, lead in my water. I understand that. But I also have to understand from a nationwide perspective, there are nations that get it way worse than how I see it. They get it way worse, man. And we have to talk about these type of issues. We have to be aware as Westerners, because it's not just a it's not just an issue aside from Western culture. This is a human issue. This is a conscious collective type issue that we have to be dealing with. We have to understand psychologically that it happens, that it continues to happen, that it always has happened. It's another form of genocide for African peoples. So yeah, I just want to know what y'all think about the whole situation. The state of Libya right now is, as far as my perspective, it seems tragic, non-resourceful, scarce in food. I looked at anecdotes from people in Libya talking about they rather die, and many of them are trying to travel towards Europe for some sake of survival. You guys have to understand, all developed means is a colonized land, or excuse me, all developed means is a demographic in which colonized a land and extracted their resources. So they want to go to Europe because it's resourceful now. After all the stealing, Europe and America is resourceful. But people are being gunned down in their attempts at sea to go to Europe. You have people being taken, people being sold. It's inhumane, man. I just want to know what y'all think on them coming upon 8 minutes. Why is the media not even touching on it? Why does it take regular citizens in droves to come about and talk about this shit? It's because it's nothing I'm conspiring. It's because they're in on the shit. Hillary, Obama, any president that you've seen, any presidential face, they represent corruption as well. They represent the elite as well. There will always be famine as long as our regime is like this, man. Break the system. Break the stigma. Peace. High vibes to Libya, man. I don't know what I can do from my position. I can just only speak on it from my position. I don't have the resources to do what I want to do, but shit, I might as well speak on it and give it to my platform or somebody who can at least put it in their minds to know that it's a problem. You know what I mean? I think the change comes psychologically. We have to know how African people around the world are being treated. It's inhumane. So peace to Africa, peace to Libya, peace to all the nations and all the continents that go through suffrage due to Western society, man. Peace, man. Love.